Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us at Israel in Miami. My name is Galit Peleg, and I'm the Consul General of Israel in Miami. Yesterday, November 11th, we marked here in the United States Veterans Day. Since Israel shared the tremendous respect to those who serve, and in fact, almost everyone in Israel is a veteran, including myself, we at the Israeli Consulate in Miami organized this webinar to honor and salute the veterans of both our countries. Once these valorous women and men complete their service, they return home to a different reality. Some need financial support or career guidance, others need physical treatment, and there are those who don't have visible wounds. However, they need other means of healing. We are very honored to have here with us tonight senior representatives of two different organizations, Camaraderie Foundation and Heroes to Heroes, I assume two of many organizations, who dedicate their resources, each in their unique way, to the noble work of assisting the veterans to regain peace and normalcy in their life. I would like, and I have the honor, and I would like now to introduce our guests for this evening. Ms. Judy Isaacson Elias, founder and CEO of Heroes to Heroes. Judy is the founder and president of Heroes to Heroes. She spent 2 years in financial services industry, working as a rainmaker with Morgan Stanley. Before her time in financial services, she spent over 20 years in media and marketing, advertising in radio. And she received her Master of Science degree in nonprofit leadership and management from Fordham University in New York, and a Bachelor of Arts in social work at Kent University in Ohio. Our second guest is Mr. Neftali Nef Rodriguez. Nef Rodriguez joined the Camaraderie Foundation in March 2018 and currently serves as the executive director. I'm sorry. He has more than 30 years senior executive experience in program planning and management, risk management, and leadership in diverse industries, including civilian and military, that span national and global markets. Neff is a retired armor officer and served over 30 years in the US Army and received the Bronze Star during Desert Storm. After retiring from the Army, he served the next 7 years in Afghanistan with MPRI, L3, and DINCORP International, building the Afghan National Army training centers from the ground up. His responsibilities including establishing the Afghan National Army training school in infantry, fires, intelligence, counter IED, mission command, maneuver, and logistics to accomplish the mission of defeating the enemies of Afghanistan. I think I understood only the last sentence, but it's the most important one. With us also tonight, our third guest is Mr. Roberto Cintron, that was kind enough to join us for sharing his story as a veteran in participating in his project with the project of Heroes to Heroes. I would like to ask Judy and Neff the same question, if you will be kind enough to tell us a little bit about your organization. Will you start with Judy, please?
Thank you, Galit, and thank you all for being here. Each day, 20 veterans die by suicide in the United States. It's an epidemic. It's a federal crime. Heroes to Heroes provides spiritual healing and peer support to veterans who have attempted suicide or who are on the path of self-destruction. There are many. What we do is we provide our veterans with a 10-day journey to Israel. And people ask, why Israel? It has to go back to what's happening with our veterans. A big issue many people have, and we really don't think about when we send people to war. And what is war about? War is about killing. We send our young men and women to war. We ask them to do what they have to do. They come home, and we expect them to just go back and lead different lives. Many of our veterans are returning home and just saying, I can't do it. There's something wrong. There's something going on. And now there's a name for that, and it's called moral injury. And moral injury takes place when a person is asked to do something that is abhorrent to them, that is against their moral code, against their ethical code. At Heroes to Heroes, our mission is to make sure we heal that moral injury, which is basically healing the soul. And people ask us why we take people to Israel. What is it that Israel has? Well, over 300 veterans have gone on our journeys to Israel. And what they found is the healing of their soul. 80% of our veterans will tell us that God wishes they were dead, that they don't belong here. We then take them to Israel. They take their journey, they take their pilgrimage, and that soul is healed. One of the most important connections a person can have is a connection to his or her creator. And our veterans, who are from all faiths, about 98 to 99% are of Christian faith. We have also taken Muslims, we have taken Jewish people, we have taken people who are unaffiliated, not interested. And Israel works her magic. Our veterans travel from the Galilee to where they get baptized in the Jordan River if they're of Christian faith. They travel to Jerusalem where they walk the Stations of the Cross, visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, put their hands on the Western Wall. And it's all about that connection. When we start to hear, they tell us, wow, if God didn't want me to be alive, he wouldn't have allowed me to come here. Then we know we've turned that corner. And for many, it's the first time they can smile, the first time they can connect, and the first time we hear them say, we're happy to be alive, we're happy to be here. And that journey to Israel allows them to connect physically so they can connect spiritually. To give you an idea of what goes on, there's a young man named Stephen. And Stephen didn't want to live. He had 4 suicide attempts, 26 years old. His father called me in tears and said, I think your program is the only program that can help my son. And about our 3rd or 4th day in Israel, we walked through Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial. And as we left the Children's Memorial, Stephen said, I need to talk to all of you. And for the first time, he was able to speak. And he said, when I was in Iraq, my unit was ambushed. There was an insurgent who was about to take a shot at one of my battle buddies. I had to make a split-second decision whether I eliminate that insurgent or just take a chance on my battle buddy, but I had to save my battle buddy. Well, that insurgent was 10 years old. And Stephen had that young man visited Stephen in his dreams every night. He couldn't sleep and he couldn't forgive himself. But when he walked out of Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial, he said, what I learned in there is I'm a soldier. I'm not a killer. I'm not a murderer. The next day, the team went to Bethlehem, and for the first time, Stephen was able to pray when he was in the Church of the Nativity. We went back, and then the day after that, we planted trees. It's very important to plant trees in the Holy Land, in Israel. And Stephen planted a tree in memory of that young man. We all cried, we all spoke, and we all let him know that that was probably the greatest honor that young man was ever given in his life. That night, Stephen slept for the first time. Today, he's working as a manager of a vitamin shop in Oklahoma, and he's taking care of his physical health, keeping up to date with his spiritual health, and making sure that I take my vitamins. So, that will give you an overview of what we're doing. And I have to say, Galit, on behalf, I want to thank Israel for all you've done, all Israel has done for our veterans.
Wow, thank you, Judy. With such a start, I don't know how we continue from here. Wow, thank you for what you're doing. Nef, would you tell us a little bit about your organization, please?
Yeah, this is going to be a tough act to follow there, but we do a great job together, and it's teamwork. That's what it takes. And I'd also like to thank you for hosting this webinar on such a great and timely topic. The invisible wounds of war, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and COVID are indiscriminate. They don't care about international boundaries, and they affect military members from all nations, all ranks, and it's fitting and proper that we address this issue together. Camaraderie Foundation mission is to provide healing for the invisible wounds of war for all branches of military service members, post 9/11 members, and their families. Now, these groups face three major issues post-deployment when they come home, and that's the suicide, transitioning back to the real world, as you mentioned, and the PTSD. Our programs are created to assist them in combating those three issues and thereby saving lives and saving families. We do that with three programs, or what we call three pillars. One is counseling. We provide counseling for individual, marital, family counseling, for children even. And then we also have a mentor leadership program, which helps veterans transition back into the civilian world and take those skills that they've learned in the service and translate that into what would help a corporation. And then the third pillar we have is the Family Fun Days, which takes the family group and brings them back together and reunites them with other family members. When you're in the service and you're stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, or you're stationed somewhere overseas, we have that camaraderie, that friendship. And so the families hang together, we barbecue together on weekends and evenings. But then when you get out of the military and you go home to Orlando, or you go to Walla Walla, Washington, wherever you're from, the guy in apartment 2C could really care less what you're doing this weekend. And so these families lose that camaraderie that they had developed together. And so we bring them back together, and we take them to SeaWorld for events. We'll take them to the beach for events. And we also use that kind of as a backdoor method. Big, tough Army guys like myself, we don't like to admit when we need help. And we're always the last to take care of ourselves. And so we use this method to get them to come to an event with the family. And the wife can bring them and drag them along like they usually do. And then when they get there, they get to meet other guys who have actually gone through the counseling, through the help. And he kind of said, hey, look, guy, I've been there. I understand. I needed help. I got help. And it's been very successful in getting guys who are reluctant to get the help they need to get the help. And so those are just the three pillars that we do. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I guess this feeling of you're not alone is the main message that you can give to veterans wherever they are.
Absolutely.
I want to address both of you the same question. Again, a more personal question. What made you dedicate your life and your resources to this cause? I understand, Neff, you're coming from a military background. Judy, you are not. But, you also could have, after 30 years of being brave enough for your country, you could have said, okay, I did my deed, and now I can, live my life with my family, and why continue that? Maybe we'll start now with Neff.
Well, it's really interesting. One was I started missing my soldiers. I missed them when I retired. And that was what drove me to go to Afghanistan and be with them again. And then when I came home from Afghanistan, I still missed them. So again, that camaraderie, that feeling of belonging together and serving my troops. The other thing that really drove me to come to Camaraderie Foundation was I have two sons who followed in my footsteps. One is still on active duty, my oldest, who's a major. In fact, right now he's in Saudi Arabia deployed for a year. My second son, who was an NCO, was hit with 2 IEDs in Iraq. The first one killed 3 of his buddies in his vehicle and flipped it over. He was medevac to the rear. They brought him back. He got in another vehicle, went to retrieve his friends, and was hit again. And so it completely devastated his body. And so he's medically retired. He suffered from PTSD. And when he came home, they put him on the traditional medication. And when the medication doesn't work for these young men and women, they start using alcohol to supplement, to dull that pain, or the physical and the mental pain. And so he did that and ended up with a SWAT unit outside his house, ready to do a breach when they called me. And so I have been through this as a parent, and I understand what it's like having a child suffering through that, as well as being a soldier and knowing what he's going through. And so the great thing about Camaraderie Foundation is we serve the entire family, not just the veteran. So the parents can get mental health counseling from us. The children can get mental health counseling. And so that's what drove me to do this.
So important. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Judy?
Okay, thank you. My story goes back a long way, and I'll make it as concise as possible. I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran who suffered greatly. My father was Second Day Normandy, Battle of the Bulge, liberator of a concentration camp, and he came home, but he never came home. And it was a very tough life, especially at that point where men were supposed to come home and there was no help. There was no PTSD diagnosis. There was this shell shock, and you ended up in a mental institution. So most of our soldiers who suffered just suffered silently. And when I was 16 years old, I couldn't take it anymore, and I was drinking, I was doing drugs, and I ran away from home, went to live with a friend's family, and I stayed in touch with my father because I connected with his pain. And he called me one day and said, you know, we were able to get you on a trip with US-wide pilgrimage to Israel. Would you go? And my first reaction was, I want nothing to do with this. I want nothing to do with Israel. I want nothing to do with being Jewish. And my father said, please do it for me. And how do you say no? Well, the next thing I knew, I was walking in the old city and we were going toward the Western Wall. And I broke down. I said, I can't do this. I don't deserve this. I shouldn't be here. This is, I have really been bad. And friends of mine said, you have to do it. You have to do it. And when I went up to the Western Wall and I put my hand on the wall, it changed my life. And I began to choose properly. I returned home, finished high school, went to college. Years passed, and I was invited to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in December 2009. And I visited our soldiers. And what I saw just tore at my heartstrings. They didn't want to come home. They didn't know how to be home. And I started volunteering for organizations, and then I started reading about the suicide rate. And at the time it was 22 a day. And I said, this is not okay. What can I do? And I started reading about suicide. And what I kept finding was people who are involved with their faith and their faith community are 5 times less likely to die by suicide. And I said, I have to do something. And I remembered what happened to me when I was 16. And I thought, what if I took veterans to Israel, no matter what faith, no matter what background, and I allowed them to have the connection that I was given at the age of 16? Would it help them make the same decisions I made? And Heroes to Heroes was born. And on September 11th, 2011, our first team of 10 American veterans, 5 Israeli veterans joined us in Israel at the time. Now we have 12 Americans and 3 Israelis on the program each time. And here we were. And what we saw was every single one of those veterans said, I'm at peace. I feel content. I feel peaceful for the first time in my life. I feel safe. And that's why I'm still here today, 311 veterans later. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. You know, it's amazing. I mean, each one of you told a totally different story. And yet, when you talked about your father, I saw Neff nodding his head, because there are so many parallel feelings. And I guess no matter why or from where you are coming to this cause, I guess the same feelings, you share the same feelings and definitely the same goals. And it's very touching. I mean, I'm sure that our audience that is watching us, some of them wrote that they have tears in their eyes just to listen to you too. We didn't yet hear from the testimonies from the veterans that went through your projects, and already we have tears in our eyes. I would like to remind our audience that you can also post some questions, and we will address them to our speakers. So please use the Q&A or the chat to ask questions. We're now in a very strange time. I mean, Neff, you stressed the need of the feeling of the families to be together and the people to support each other. And now we're in this era that the whole world is shattered. Nobody is together with anybody. We can't even be together with our own families. So I would like to ask you about the challenge of Corona, how it affects your work with veterans.
Well, it's had two different effects. One is on funding, naturally, because we can't host the normal events that we do, like the golf tournament, the galas, the things that we do to raise funds to pay for the mental health counseling. And so that was the biggest impact. The second impact that it gave to us is that the demand on services has increased dramatically. You know, as you pointed out, you know, everybody's locked up at home, and isolation is the worst thing that could happen for these families and these individuals suffering with these invisible wounds of war. And yet that's exactly what's happened to them. And so as Judy's pointed out, everyone knows, you know, the 22 a day that commit suicide. But what they probably don't know right now is that in the last 7 months, that's increased 20%. And so it's even gotten worse. And so you're seeing incidents of violent behavior, domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse have all spiked in these families. And then they're worried about what am I going to do for pay since I can't hold a job, especially here in Orlando area where Disney and Universal are all laying off, you know, and the tourism is down. So they're worried about their next paycheck. And so they're not reluctant to even try to get help, because they want to take care of their families with their personal needs of their home and food. And so mental health is the last thing on their mind. And so I do stress to everyone, veterans out there and the family members, our services are absolutely free. And so please do not let the need or concern of feeding your family stop you from asking for help, because we are here for you. We will do it absolutely free. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
Judy, what do you do now when you don't have delegations, actually, missions to Israel?
Okay. Well, what we've done is it's very frightening for us, because we have over 600 veterans on our waiting list, and Israel is not open. So please, Galit, if there's anything you can do, we need Israel open again. What we have done is we brought everything online. We brought everything to Zoom. We have had each team, we've had 28 teams travel to Israel. So each team has at least a weekly Zoom meeting. Everyone is on WhatsApp. We have chats going on. If someone is in trouble, the information goes out. We've had a couple situations where we've actually sent a veteran to see another veteran to make sure that that person wasn't alone. So we've done everything we can to help them continue with that belonging. What we're finding, the veterans from our first team from 2011 are still involved in the organization. And during COVID, they got more involved. We have a spouses program, so the spouses understand what is happening in Israel, and they know what to expect when our vets get home, and they know how to work with them moving forward. So I think Roberto can speak a little bit on that as well. But it's been a tough time. Of course, financially, it's not quite devastating, but it's not good. What we're planning on doing is doubling our teams to Israel next year and having a big reunion as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe. We did have 2 golf outings, one in New York and one in LA, that were COVID safe, but we couldn't include our veterans except for a few who had already had COVID and they socially distanced, to just be there to greet because they just wanted to be somewhere. They wanted to feel like they physically belong. So it is very, very difficult. We're, God willing, our first team will go in April. We'll leave in April, and we'll have a team, at least a team a month from April to September, and then I think in November as well. So it has been a challenge, but our focus has been almost a buddy system, just knowing where everyone is, keeping in touch. It's painful that we cannot add, and we haven't been able to knock off some of that waiting list of 600. It's very frightening.
Thank you, Judy. By the way, the reason that your mission cannot go to Israel is because America is not green yet. Once it will become a green country, then it will, because we already have allowed an exchange. Other countries allowed Israelis to go. So far, it's only in our region. I mean, Greece and Seychelles. But I hope for the United States that the health will be here stronger, and you will beat the corona, and we will beat the corona, and both our countries will be green again, and we'll be able to visit each other. My last question for both of you, and then I would like to hear really the veterans that experience your projects is, maybe it's a question more for Neff than for Judy, because Judy, it's very unique what you're doing, but maybe for Neff, do you think that, do you find that holding collaboration with different organizations of veterans, is it helpful? Are you doing it? Or is it something that you're uniquely working with the veterans and without other NGOs?
No, as a matter of fact, that was one of the things I started working on when I first came on board with Camaraderie 2 years ago. Was I noticed that everybody was doing their own thing. All these veteran organizations were all out there raising funds and all going in different directions, and sometimes the same directions, and crossing paths and never working together. And so in the Orlando area, I've started working with other veteran organizations and other nonprofits, even ones that don't serve veterans, but coming together and forming a veteran coalition so that we can take the pool of money, because it is finite. There's not it's not an infinite source. And so if we compare our services with other organizations and then find someone who maybe they can do housing for one veteran, I can take care of the mental health piece, somebody else can take care of the food piece. The more that we do that and collaborate together, the more that I can focus on helping the mental health aspect, and it frees up funds for me to do that and focus. And so I do like that. And so I encourage everyone out there, if you want to help, please do. All these organizations are great organizations, and please reach out and help us.
Thank you. Do you want to reply to this?
Yes, we actually partner with a few organizations. JNF, Jewish National Fund. We partner. We work very closely with them. They help us by providing trees in Israel and speaking. It's an incredible partnership. We also work with Boulder Crest and Mighty Oaks, which are two programs that are perfect for post-journey for Heroes to Heroes. They also work on spiritual growth. We're working with the VA chaplains right now to, they have a program called Building Spiritual Strength that they're training us on so we can incorporate it into our program. And we're looking to build a manual and publish a manual that will be available to all churches and groups traveling to Israel to help them turn the Israel experience into more of a healing experience. So there are a lot of projects. We're working with the University of South Alabama. They're doing a long-term research study on our program. The first thing they found out was that this program can only happen in Israel. So, you know, it's a blessing, and it's also difficult because one of the things the VA wants to do is open up the program and find a way to have more veterans involved. So it seems like that's a challenge that we have to overcome, but it's also very good for Israel. And I think our veterans will tell you the same thing, that it would have been a challenge to do here. So we're also partner with other organizations because we have so many applications, and we have a qualifying survey to be part of our program. And for the veterans who don't qualify, we want to make sure they're in a program as soon as possible. So I'm actually very happy Naftali is here because we have a lot of applications from Florida, and I'm sure we can do some talking and help a lot of people together. So thank you. That was a great question.
We have the representative of JNF here in the crowd, and he's Zohar, and he says that JNF is very proud to be a strategic partner with Heroes to Heroes. Thank you, Zohar. We will get back to Judy and F with some questions from our audience, but I would like to give now the microphone to our guest, Roberto Cintron, that was kind enough to share with us his experience on the journey with Heroes to Heroes. After Roberto will finish talking, we'll finish sharing his story, and I'm sure that it will be, it again will bring tears to our eyes. We will see a short clip of a soldier named Chris, a veteran, that is a partner to the projects of Camaraderie Foundation. Roberto, please.
Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to be speaking to the social media. And my story begins during my active duty. I served in the U.S. Navy for 4 years, then went back to college, and I got my commission through ROTC and became a commissioned officer with the Air Force. During my Air Force career, I was working intelligence. And obviously, intelligence is a field that you work, but you don't talk about it. And during the early stages in my field, my career, I started suppressing a lot of emotions. But most importantly, when I was deployed to Central America out of Panama, Howard Air Force Base, that I was supporting the Central America mission, I became almost mute to the pain, mute to the death. And when I seek for help, they immediately labeled me as having mental issues. So I promised myself that I would not expose myself ever again to this kind of treatment, and also to this type of humiliation. I knew back then that something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong with me. During the rest of my career, I hear stories from my children that mentioning, Dad, I don't recall you being there for me. And unknowingly, I retired from the military and I went back to the same business that I was working before in Central America and the Caribbean. This time was with Department of Justice. And I was exposed very much to the same situation. People getting killed, people drowning because they were trying to get to the United States. And I was completely emotionless. I would go anywhere, and I would not be moved by just looking at the people being killed or dying. So I lived with that for 30 years until I was working with the federal government. I collapsed and I went into respiratory arrest, and they brought me back, obviously. And during that experience, I realized that I didn't want to come back, that I want to stay dead, and I didn't want to come back. And it was our Almighty God and Jesus that told me, your mission is not done. So I was brought back in the emergency room. And the question at that point was, what is my mission then? And I started seeking and looking. I have always been Catholic and practicing Catholic, but that was not enough. And it was not until a friend of mine mentioned to me about Heroes to Heroes. And I filled out the application and I was interviewed. And I was completely at all because I didn't know that a program like that could exist. So I faithfully just first time ever, because during my accident at work, I ended up with a traumatic brain injury. So I wasn't able to walk for 9 months. I wasn't able to do anything. So that's how my retired life began. And so I took a leap of faith with Heroes to Heroes, and I went to Israel. And I quickly realized in Israel, especially when I was at the wall, that I asked the Lord, if you take the medications that I'm taking for PTSD, I would just do it. And at that very moment, I felt deeply in my heart that the Lord said, trust me, have faith in me. And I went with Team 21 3 years ago. And even in Israel, I decided to stop taking some of the medications that will make me completely numb, disoriented, wasn't able to articulate complete thoughts. I decided to take those medications and just stop completely, cold turkey. In my journey, that's where my life began. And that was when I realized that the purpose for the rest of my life was to serve Heroes to Heroes. And I have always been a very athletic person. And I was looking for a way on how to make a difference to the veterans. And obviously realize all the mistakes that I have made. When my daughter tells me that I don't recall during my teenager years that you were there, because I lived in escape mode, just looking to go back to where the pain began and try to find healing. But I was looking for healing in the wrong place. And that's what Heroes to Heroes provided me the opportunity to go where everything began and to have the opportunity with other soldiers to heal together. And we became a family. In 3 years, we still communicate and we still take care of them. But most importantly, I became aware of the suicidal rate. So for me, I put a lot of emphasis that any of the veterans, that you're not alone, that you have different groups and Heroes to Heroes that we can support your needs. Maybe not at this time going to Israel, but yes, be able to talk to you. Nothing is impossible. I was waiting just for death to come to me, and it happened once. But now my goal and purpose in life is to continue living until the Lord calls me, but living for heroes to heroes. I thank you very much, and please support Heroes to Heroes.
Roberto, thank you so much. I listen to you and I think, being courageous is not only taking a gun and going to war, it's also sharing your very personal story and your feelings. I guess it's a different kind of courage, but it also takes a very courageous man to stand in front of the camera, especially in front of people that you don't know, and to share your story, knowing that it might help someone. So thank you so much. And in this spirit, we're going to watch now a short clip of another veteran that participated in the project of Camaraderie Foundation. Can we see the clip?
Pop out at my best way to put it is like you're cranking a jack in the box, and you're just cranking it and you're cranking it and you're cranking it and you're cranking it, and it might pop out, it might not, but the entire time you're cranking it, you're anticipating it to pop out. When we were in Iraq, what we did was literally we went and patrolled every day. We just got in our trucks and we just drove around every day, sometimes 8, most of the time 10, 12 hours, right? Not knowing what's going to blow up at any given time, that constant stress, that constant worry, that constant on-edge feeling you have, that takes a toll on you. And it's not until years later that you realize that that's just kind of how you are now. No, you just don't want to admit that you're broke. I mean, at least that's how it was for me. Especially when you're in, this is across the service, but especially in the infantry, in any combat role, you gotta be tough. You gotta be able to brush it off. You gotta be able to focus on the task at hand. And then after the service, the task at hand was go to work every day, make a paycheck, provide for your family, do good at work, and get all your tasks done. And then you didn't really allow yourself a lot of time to stop and do any kind of self-maintenance. So yeah.
What helped you, get over the fence?
Probably a combination of time. A failing marriage. I kind of saw that a lot of my behaviors were affecting my family. So talking to Ruben, that was the easiest part. He wasted no time. I mean, he did all the hard work. I mean, he literally moments later, I had an email with several different providers that were in my area. And, he said, look, if none of those work out for you, let me know, I'll send you more. If you've got your own provider, and if they're not in our list, we'll put them in our list. And that's something that Camaraderie Foundation does very well, is just make it easy. And there's literally no strings attached. And working things out. I can't change, and a counselor can't change the things that have happened, but just getting them out and talking them through with somebody, that the amount of processing space that I gathered just from going to counseling, like I'm actually able to think.
You had to advise anybody who's feeling the effects of PTSD or might be going through it and they might not be aware, what would you tell them?
the realist in me will tell them you'll know when you're ready.
Wow. I needed to take a deep breath after hearing both of you, Roberto and Chris. And again, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. I would like now to attend some questions that we got from our viewers. There was one question here that Wendy asked a few minutes ago. Maybe it's for Heroes to Heroes. Both of you maybe. Judy and Roberto can answer this. The question was, is the connection with Israel, what the process that Israel does, is it only the religion experience, or is it also the fact that in Israel everybody lives around the military service, every home has someone who served, so people understand what it means. Even I can tell you as an Israeli, the Israeli experience is not exactly like the American experience. Israeli soldiers are fighting. They don't deploy for 8 months away from home. But on the other hand, they feel that they protect the home because they really fight sometimes they fight 2 miles from their home. If somebody is fighting in Gaza and he lives in a kibbutz or in a village on the border, so he's literally fighting for his backyard. So do you think that there is an influence, the factor of Israel, is it only the fact that it's the Holy Land that connects you through the religion, or also because Israelis understand what it's like to serve in the army because of this, that more people understand army or navy or whatever, military?
Roberto, if you're okay answering this question, I think it should come from you.
Of course. For me, it's a combination. It's a combination because we go to Israel seeking for something, and all of a sudden we find a journey that begins with no end. But at the same time, it is a validation and to show and to receive the importance of serving our country. Granted, we normally go overseas to serve and be willing to sacrifice our life for the freedom of our nation. But as soon as I went to Israel, it was a combination. People living in peace, people living among each other and respecting each other. And we are not second guess in terms of the service that we provided in our military career. That is always honor. And I saw that when we visited the cemetery, that there were some Israelis that told the stories about the soldiers. And for me, it was very appealing, but at the same time, it gave me a clear understanding of the pride and knowing that what we have done is the right thing. And so for Israel, it's a perfect fit, going and having the faith, knowing that you will find something there, that you will be healed, and that's where your life begins again.
Thank you. Judy, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. I see it from the outside in. And like Roberto said, it's often a combination of the faith connection and the Israel connection. We've had veterans who tell us they sleep better in Israel because they know they're not the ones protecting the sheep. They can put their guard down because 70% of the country is going to protect them in any given moment, and the borders are closed. So for many of our veterans, there's a safety in Israel that they don't feel here. We also have 3 Israeli veterans that travel for the 10 days with our veterans. And they develop relationships and talk about the differences in the military and what it's like to serve in your backyard as opposed to going to someone else's backyard. So there's a lot of commonality. There's, the faith picture is very important for our veterans. Again, bringing that back to the moral injury. And some of our veterans will say, my soul is healed. I'm here and my soul was put back together. And from there, they can start their healing. So Israel gives both. And I think without either portion, the veteran portion, I had one person say to me, Judy, Israel's like Disneyland for a veteran. It has everything we want. We feel safe here. We feel like we belong. I've had veterans ask me about making Aliyah. I've had veterans ask me, how do they go back? Roberto is one of our coaches. So we offer the opportunity for some of our veterans to go back as a coach and lead their own team. What an experience that is to help your fellow veterans get through this. It's an intense 10 days of work. And they're up early, they have meetings late, but it has to be done in Israel because of the reasons you mentioned, Galit.
Thank you. I will ask you the last question. Mark is asking a question to Neff and to Judy. How do you avoid the politics in all of it? Is there a risk of contaminating the spiritual and therapeutical experience?
Okay. Well, we have a lot of politics involved because it's Israel and the US. Okay. And you mentioned Israel and all kinds of things happen. But we focus on the healing. And, I've gotten, in the beginning, I had trouble with that question. Now that we actually have scientific proof that the program works, it's all about the healing. And I think one of the things we do is our tour guides in Israel have to be apolitical. They are not allowed to say anything but fact on the ground. Any other topics, discussions, every once in a while, questions come up, but our tour guides are trained. We have about 3 or 4 tour guides who work with us. And we don't want to know who you're supporting in the election. We don't want to know what you think of what area of Israel. We're not interested. It's about the spirituality. It's about the cultural differences, and we stay away. Yes, one of our teams did meet with the Prime Minister. Another team met with the President of Israel. That was a meet and greet. Wasn't a political stop. And when the Prime Minister and the President want to meet with you, you kind of say yes, no matter who they are. So we stay away from it in our groups. We're working pretty closely with the VA right now. And so, we're asked to advocate on behalf of veterans. We do very little advocacy because that's not really what we're here to do. But we do step up when that's required. But aside from that, we keep politics out of it.
Yeah, and ours is we don't play with any politics at all involved with ours. We just provide the counseling services. We don't tell the clients what therapies to choose. We offer all therapies as long as they have empirical data behind them to support them. And so, the unique thing about it is what works for one person may not work for someone else. And so it's not one size fit all. And so that's why we do work with other organizations, like Judy's. Because it just depends. Some people, equine therapy is great. They love horses. Some people want to talk to a group and talk it out. Others don't want to be in a group. They want to talk one-on-one with a counselor. And so you've got to feel what is it that this person particularly needs. And that's where Ruben comes in when he does the initial interview with them to find out what is it that you really want, what are your needs, what are your interests. And then we remove all the barriers that they have to completing their counseling, which is why right now we have an 89% success rate, which the industry standard is 50. So we're doing really, really well with our counseling program.
Thank you very much. There are some more questions, but unfortunately we have to wrap it. I think it was an amazing hour. I was fascinated. I didn't know what to expect, and I think it was very, very interesting. I hope it was also interesting to all the people that joined us. I would like to thank very much our panelists, Nef and Judy, Roberto. I want to also to thank Chris that we saw on the film that you shared with us, Nef. Thank you for everybody that joined us. I want to, I don't know if anyone can send the message, but to really thank all of us, all of the good men and women who are serving and protecting us and protecting both our homelands and our values and our democracy. And it's not a cliche, and we appreciate them very much. Thank you to all the veterans, and I wish them all well. I would like to thank also my team that behind the scene that organized everything technically and made this event successful. I would like to update you that, like I said, we take this issue of veterans to our hearts very much, not only once a year, not as these noble organizations, but that we all year round, but we really dedicate from our hearts. So there are a few other things that we would like to do during the coming year. We already did, together with Heroes to Heroes, we are organizing an exhibition of photos that veterans took while they were in Israel, with sharing what Israel did to their experience. And right now it's virtual, but we hope that soon we will be able to hang the exhibition and to present it in different places that people can see. If you want to invite this exhibition and to put it somewhere at your center or community center or whatever, so we'll be very happy to accommodate it. And also we will, during the year, we will invite veterans that came back from Israel to share their story with different communities, churches. So you're all welcome to join us and watch it and participate and ask questions and share your experience. I imagine that among the people that were watching us, there were a lot of veterans. So I want to tell you that we really respect everything you're doing, and we would like to give you as much support as we can. Thank you so much for joining us, and just be safe in every way. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.